Hey guys, welcome back to the Fitness and Sushi podcast. I'm Deanna Schober, and I am beyond excited today to have my very first and could quite possibly be my only special guest because I don't know that anyone could ever live up to this. My mentor, Jill Coleman, who is also the founder of Moderation 365, which we're going to talk a lot about today. Welcome to Fitness and Sushi, Jill.
I am so beyond honored. Well, you know, I love you and I love Tony, and I'm just so excited to know this podcast. And I just had a front row seat of you launching the podcast and all that stuff. So it is my honor to be on and to be the first guest.
Yeah, you guys, Fitness and Sushi would not be here without Jill. So she is very, very near and dear to me and has just gotten me to where I am, and Tony, by proxy at this point in my life. So but Jill has such an interesting and I think fascinating history with as far as food goes and moderation goes. Jill, I kind of found you, I guess it's been 10 years or so. It's been a really long time.
Yep.
We both started our blogs right around the same time, or Tony did. I was just kind of a backup singer at that point in time for him, but was supporting him with social media stuff and would kind of, see who was in that space with him. And you were one of the people that was in the same space. And so at the time I found you, or that we found you, you were a guest on Tony's blog, Coach Calorie, at the time. And you were still pretty, tell us a little bit about your background and where you came from. You started out, you've always been into sports, and you're an athlete, and I think you went to school for.
Yep. So, I was one of those people who was lucky enough to just fall in love with exercise at an early age.
Yeah.
Ended up, doing all the sports through high school and into college, and went and got my undergrad in exercise science. And at the time, this is early 2000s, you didn't really know what job you were going to get. That
right.
was a weird sort of space, but I loved fitness and I didn't know what job you could get from that. Even to my parents' sort of dismay, were what are you going to do with that? And so I didn't know. And I was lucky enough to get a job working in a corporate center. Literally, I'm are you serious? I get paid a salary and benefits, and I just get to talk about exercise with people all day. And that was blast. And then I think it's a natural progression for someone who is really interested in fitness to want to take things up a notch. Mm-hmm. And so throughout my 20s, I actually competed in figure competitions. And at that point I was okay, let me try and understand nutrition. Because up until that point, it was mostly just, I work out so I can eat what I want. Mm-hmm. Terrible diet. And then, when I first did my very first competition, lost about 20 pounds, and I was a normal weight, before then. And I lost 20 pounds, got up on stage, won my show. And that's where this sort of exercise and nutrition obsession began. A lot of that was from sort of the affirmation that I was getting from my body changing so drastically, and the sort of willpower and the sacrifice and all of those things that before you know it, you're sort of addicted to that feeling, and you see yourself be 10% body fat, 12% body fat. And you go, I don't understand why I can't stay there forever. And so after my first competition, I gained about 15 pounds in 2 weeks, mm-hmm. and I was devastated. And I didn't recognize my body, the compliments and the affirmation and all that I was getting about my body, they dried up. Right. And I was embarrassed. I was wow, I'm someone who, dedicated myself to this process, got up on stage, won my show. And now I feel sort of chopped liver. I was kind of I'm not worthy anymore. I'm not getting the compliments and the approval that I was before. I just need to do another show. Mm-hmm. So for me, that began 6 years of this sort of very all or nothing dieting, to where when I was feeling lean, I was confident, I felt good about myself. And then when I would gain the weight right after the show or after the photo shoot. And then all of a sudden I was embarrassed, guilt, shame, all those sort of negative motivators. And it took up 100% of my time. And I think a lot of women, I never asked myself why I'm doing this. I think mm-hmm. it was one of those things where most of us are sort of dieting before we even know it. So we wake up and we're 30, 40, 50, and we've been dieting for decades, and we sort of don't know how we got there, and we don't know how to dig ourselves out of it.
Yeah. So it's almost I feel when I hear you say that, it reminds me a lot of how I kept reaching the goal line for me, because I was in a very similar situation, and then I would get to the goal line and be really exciting getting there, but then it's now what? The goal line just kept moving. Was that your experience?
Yeah. I mean, for me, it was, and I kind of think back, I'm like, what was I doing thinking I'm going to get up on stage and have my body judged next to other women? Like, that's kind of wild that we think that we kind of do that. But for me, it felt like the next elite version of whatever, So for me, as someone who's kind of a recovering perfectionist, I think all of us who maybe have like food and diet sort of obsession histories, maybe have that feeling of, we don't feel good enough. There's always somewhere further to go. There's always something else to do. And it's funny because I even found when I was, and this is where I had this moment, I would be backstage at a show, literally 10% body fat, the leanest I'd ever been, and still not like my body. So if you think about it from that perspective, this like ideal look or this like perfect 10 body that we're all trying to achieve, I like literally had it and I still was poking and prodding and pulling. So that just tells you that like liking your body is subjective. There's no like objective line under which you're like, oh, finally I'm good to go. Like it's just always. And so that to me was it was a mindset issue. It really was. And it was it wasn't a strategy issue. It was just more like, okay, how can I figure this out? Because not only do I never feel good enough, but it's literally ruining my life from like a mental perspective, a time perspective. And it was a full-time job.
Yeah, I relate to that so much. Like I remember when I was never, on a competition stage, but at my leanest, I was my most insecure,
Totally.
like way more insecure than I was at like 180 pounds post-pregnancy, which was just so, I could not make sense of that at all. So what did it look like for you after those, what did food look like for you in the weeks following the stage competition when you were gaining 15 pounds?
I think it was, and it was hard because if you're listening to this, which I know if you are, you maybe have experience like this. Maybe it wasn't as like getting up on stage or doing something like that, but maybe you dieted down for your high school reunion or a vacation or some wedding or something like that. You have the experience of going through a period of time where you feel extremely deprived, both psychologically and physiologically. So I would step off stage and I know this sounds kind of weird, but like it wasn't not that it wasn't my fault, but I had to binge. Like that was just where my physiology had gotten to the point where my hunger and my cravings were so out of control that it was all I could do to hold on until that day of my show. And then it was just binging. It was, backstage at the show, even drinking red wine, eating candy. I remember after my very first show, just literally eating everything I couldn't eat, stuff I didn't even like, but because I could now eat it, stuffing myself, like I couldn't even breathe. Yeah. And it got a little bit better show to show. I remember just feeling very, not only embarrassed and all of those kind of things, but very victimized by the process the first time, being like, why didn't anyone talk about this? Why is no, and believe me, this is back in 2006. So all we're seeing about yo-yo dieting and this sort of intuitive eating and all this kind of stuff that we have now, it's great, but none of that was back then. You were reading Oxygen magazine or Muscle and Fitness, and no one's talking about post-competition blues. I don't tend towards depression, but that was probably the closest to depression I'd ever been. And we're sitting here and having this conversation. I was still weight, like I was still like, when I say I gained 15, 20 pounds after my show, I just went back to my normal weight. But at that point, it didn't feel good enough, because I had seen myself look a certain way. So the gap between where I knew I could be and where I actually was created so much shame. I was embarrassed. I'd wear like men's large Hanes t-shirts out in public if anyone saw me, because literally weeks beforehand, I was just so lean. I would be so embarrassed and ashamed that I just felt weak. And I was like, people are judging me. They think I'm lazy. All the things that I loved about sacrifice and willpower and all these kind of things, I wasn't that way. And so when I finally made the shift to figure this all out, I had to get very objective about what I was doing wasn't working. As much as I wanted it to work, I think so many women go into a new diet or they go into a new eating plan with the best intentions. And you can never win a battle of wills with your physiology. And that's sort of where I was at. It was like, it was just all I could do to not eat, to not stuff myself, cravings, hunger, everything. And so if you're someone who has cravings, it's probably because your physiology on some level is deprived. So in that way, it's really not your fault. What you are in control of is picking your head up and going, okay, how did it get to this point? And what can I do differently? And that's a scary transition, because sometimes if it's familiar, even if it's miserable, it's safe, right?
Yeah. So did you have anyone around you at that time who was pointing these things out to you or saying these things to you? Or because I know like you and I, and really Tony and I were going through this together at the exact same time that you were, but like differently. And Tony and I, people ask us all the time, and like, we had like the intuitive eating book later, but really in the beginning, like nobody was talking about this. Nobody was really going through it. So were you able to just be self-aware enough in that moment to kind of look and be like, this is not right. Something's not right here. Did you know that it was your physiology, or are you saying that retroactively now?
No. So, I did this sort of on and off, like what I just described to you, for 6 years straight. So throughout that, I had zero sort of awareness. And for me, I always just had the best intentions. I'm going to make it work this time. I'm going to do it this time. And I had to finally face the fact that I couldn't do it. Like, it just wasn't. And I associated not being able to do the diet long-term with, not being weak. Right. And so I had to just be like, okay, clinically though, it keeps not working as much as I want it to. And I have the best intentions, and I go get all the food, and I get the Tupperwares, and I do all the things. By the weekend, I'm binging. And I had to look at that objectively. And for me, it wasn't about trying to, at first, it wasn't about like, I'm going to do intuitive eating. That wasn't even a thing, to be honest. I mean, maybe it was, but I wasn't aware of it. Really, the biggest switch for me came, I had been dieting pretty straight for like about 9 months. I had a bunch of photo shoots and a couple competitions. And I remember at the end of one of the photo shoots, the very last one, I didn't have anything on my calendar. I didn't have any other events. And I was like, okay, Jill, like, you have to figure out how to eat healthy forever. Like, you can't keep doing this. You don't have any events to get ready for. I think for me, I liked start dates, right? Start dates and end dates. And it felt really organized. And I think that's why we kind of cling to new diets, is because it feels organized. And it feels good to have a plan, and we're doing something positive, and it's an overhaul, and we just like all those sort of things. But I didn't have anything else on my calendar. So I was like, okay, how am I going to figure this out? And really, it was at the exact same time that I was starting my business at Jill Fit. And I realized that there was no way I could have a successful business if I was at the gym 3 times a day, eating 7 times a day, counting and measuring everything, constantly thinking about food. I had no time or mental energy for anything else. So I had to figure out a way to decrease the amount of mental energy it was taking me and time at the gym. And I was terrified because I didn't know what the alternative looked like. Yes. And so that was that moment where I was like, all right, I got to figure this out. I don't know what it looks like. No one had a book on it. No one's writing on it. No blogs about it. So I just started doing my own thing and trying to figure it out.
Yeah. I think that for us, like Tony's was, everything that he was going through at the time. For those of y'all that listen to the podcast, he had a binge eating disorder, like everything that you're just talking about, but it had developed into a binge eating disorder from like, it had gone like a step further, and we were seeking help for that, and just kind of happened to, but I remember reading like an email from you at the same time that we were trying to figure it out. And you were also kind of in the process of forming your theories around Moderation 365. And so that was really exciting to me. Like, we're not the only ones. And I've always, because at the time back then, I feel like it was all like paleo and gluten-free and dairy-free and CrossFit. And there was just a big dogma around diets and getting more and more like biohacking. Those things were becoming more and more popular. You were one of the only people out there that I saw in our industry who was starting to question, like, is this psychologically healthy? And just hearing your story, I remember was very comforting, because you don't feel so weird.
Yeah. It was almost like I had to, for a time, I had to almost like pity my former self.
Yeah.
I would be at the gym and there'd be people getting ready for shows, and I would get a hit. I'd be like, they're getting so lean. Like, am I fat? Like, I would have these hits. And so for a time, I kind of had to talk shit. I was kind of like, let me talk shit about, like, that was the only way. Now it's whatever. Like, I work at a Gold's Gym in Venice. Everyone's constantly super lean, super shredded, whatever. And I'm just like, I understand the sacrifice that it takes. I would never want that lifestyle. Right. Back then, I almost had to like villainize the competition scene to make myself feel better and get on board with the new thing I was doing. And it wasn't, to your point, like, it was really new at the time. This is back in 2011, 2012 is when I started like making these conscious shifts. And I don't know if there were resources. I didn't have any access to them. But I remember I started reading positive psychology. That was kind of like where it started for me, and like sort of a mindset journey. And a lot of the positive psychology research is around self-acceptance and how it's not about giving up. It's actually a self-compassion that can be a productivity system and actually keeps you more compliant to something when you can show yourself kindness. Of course, I'm sure you talk about that all the time on this podcast. So if you're listening to this, it's not new news to you, but that was mind blowing to me at the time.
Yeah.
And so starting to take some of the positive psychology research I was reading about and apply it to food and lifestyle and habit change, and also getting excited about other things in my life. So to answer your question about, did I have people in my life who were pointing this out? My ex-husband at the time he was 8 years older than me, and he was kind of out of that scene. He was very much about building his business and kind of just like wanting to be normal around food. He had a better relationship with food, obviously, than I did. And I remember him saying to me when I was like in the thick of it, I mean, I would be like, are my abs showing? Like I'd be flexing my lats in the mirror, like all this stuff. And he would just be like, Jill, you have a master's degree in nutrition. I don't know why you're spending you literally only care about your physique. Like you have so much more to offer the world. And when I started blogging, I think that like gave me an outlet to get affirmation for something else. I think as humans, we always want affirmation. I don't think that ever goes away. I think diversifying the ways in which you get affirmation is smart. So it's not all the eggs in one basket, which throughout my 20s it was. Am I lean? Okay, I'm good. If I'm not lean, I'm not good. There were no other ways that I could feel like I was contributing in the world. And so when I started my blog and building my readership and actually helping clients and getting more, one-on-one clients and things like that, I started to be like, wow, it's not just my body as the offering, right? My brain can also be of use to people. And I started deriving so much more meaning and purpose out of that than I ever did with my physique pursuits.
That's amazing. Yeah. We always say, don't put your eggs in the body basket. Don't put all your eggs in the body basket on this podcast. Diversify your self-worth. Yeah. So you developed this, you had this experience with food and exercise, but, really, I think the big epiphany for you was around eating. And so you saw how much better you felt, right? After you started to loosen up a little bit with food. What did that look like for you? Did you just go straight into like, I'm going to eat nothing but donuts all day? Or you obviously terrified.
Yeah. Because I knew both ways didn't work. I had experienced both ways and neither one of them worked. The binging didn't work and the depriving didn't work. And I think that's where a huge misconception around moderation is in our space. People, especially even coaches, will say stuff like, well, if you tell people moderation, they'll go off the rails. And in my experience, they actually don't. I know you talk about this too. So what it looked like for me was something brand new that I had never done before, which was moderation. And I had never done either of those. So the way I sort of teach this in Moderation 365 in terms of like a visual is this sort of, I call it the deprivation indulgence spectrum. It's the DIS. So on one side, we have this complete deprivation. We all know what that feels like when we're dieting hard and we're like, dialed in. And then we have this sort of overindulgence, indulgence, binge side of things. And most people just ping pong back and forth between the two, right? They go, oh, I can't believe I binged. I got to be good. I'm going to deprive. And then they deprive. And then physiologically, they just can't keep doing it. So they binge. And so for me, I go, okay, what's a middle choice? Like literally that was in my head, I was like, what does a middle choice look like? And at first, because I was so scared, it was like protein bars and protein shakes and like things that you and I would be like, that's a health food, right? But I wasn't allowing myself to have those things when I was competing. So I'd like have a protein bar, have a protein shake, have a little sprinkle of cheese on my salad, a little butter on my veggies. Now we would all say that those things are like actually fairly healthy, not a huge deal, but I allowed myself, I call them nutritional gimmies or preemptive cheats, like these sort of little nutritional relief throughout the week, because I noticed that if I deprive myself during the week, I'd binge on the weekends. And I kept doing it. I kept doing it despite the best intentions. I had to come face to face with the fact that it actually wasn't working. So let me see if I can take the edge off earlier in the week to maybe prevent some binging on the weekend. And I was terrified to do that, because what if I gave myself those nutritional gimmies and then I still binged on the weekend, right? Like, so I think a lot of people don't like that because they go on Monday, maybe they have so much guilt or disgust from the weekend. They go, I'm not going to have any cheese, any butter, anything like that, because they don't feel like they deserve it. So it really was hard for me to give myself those nutritional gimmies when I didn't feel like I earned them. I didn't feel like I was deserving of them. But what happened literally pretty quickly within a couple of weeks was I started noticing that binging and the amount of food and my cravings started decreasing on the weekend. And I'd get to Friday and I'm like, I'm good. I didn't feel this compulsion to go to the grocery store and get the cookies and get the cakes and do all that sort of like ritualistic binging I would used to do. And I was like, I'm actually kind of good. And so that was the very first step. And I was really scared. The second thing was I just stopped grocery shopping. Now, I don't necessarily recommend this, right? If you don't plan, you plan to fail or whatever, fail to plan. But I remember just being so disgusted by all the food, the diet food I had been eating, like the egg whites and the asparagus and like all this kind of stuff, the white fish, that I was like, you know what? I'm just actually not grocery shopping this week. And I was so scared to do that because if I didn't have all my arsenal of Tupperwares and my food in my kitchen, I would just surely go to McDonald's every meal, right? But what happened was I figured it out. Protein bar. Now it wasn't ideal. Protein bars, protein shakes, takeout salads, stuff like that, little cheese, avocado, bacon, whatever. But I got to the end of the week and I survived. And I was like, oh, I didn't gain the 50 pounds I thought I would. So I needed to create a show of evidence that eating moderately wouldn't make me blow up, because that's, I think, what I had in my head. And so one of the things that we do in the Moderation 365 curriculum is we give people these little sort of like nutrition challenges because they need to experience what it's like to eat moderately, to see that it actually is possible to be able to now create a show of evidence that like they can trust themselves because they don't. And so that's kind of what we do with people is we just give them these little, we say, hey, if you hate it and it doesn't work for you, deprivation's always there. Diet's always there. Like, so slowly, I started doing these things in my own life. It took me about 3 full years to make the shift from like all or nothing sort of yo-yo dieter to Moderation 365. And then what I did was I just reverse engineered my process. I was like, let me see if these tools would help other people. And I put out my course, Food Obsession Bootcamp, in 2014. It was a low ticket DIY course. We had thousands of people go through that and it worked, and it was working for them too. And so from there, we created the certification. So now we certify professionals in the methods.
Yeah. So if you're listening and you are a professional, you need to get certified in Moderation 365 so that you can teach your clients how to do exactly what you just talked about, because it's so important. What do you see as the biggest struggle that people have around moderation?
It's the same struggle. They don't trust themselves, right? They go, you don't understand, Jill. So I would say the biggest issue that people come to moderation, it's not necessarily a weight loss method. That's always when people just think it's like another diet. And I know that these are some of the sound bites. Lifestyle, it's a lifestyle. This really isn't. This is, so when someone comes to me and they're like, this sounds really great, but I still feel like I have to count macros, or I still feel like I want to lose 20 pounds. I'm like, you might not be ready yet. So you'll know when you're ready for this approach, when weight loss isn't the goal anymore. Now, that's not to say that weight loss can't be an effect, but that's not front and center, right? Right. And that can't be. And it's the same thing. And I talk about this in business too. And you know this, money can't be the goal. Right. Money is a result of doing what you love. Same exact thing. Right. So figuring out a way that you can eat forever that isn't on one end or the other of these two extremes, you may or may not lose weight. Most people do over time. It doesn't happen in 2 months, 3 months. It happens maybe over a course of 2 years once you start figuring this stuff out. Biggest challenge on the ground with most people is this idea that if they start eating something that is not on their plan, they're going to just polish off the entire thing. I would say that's probably the hardest thing that we work on with our clients, is getting them to truly believe that they can stop at a couple bites, because they haven't had that experience ever. All they know is their history has shown them that they can't trust themselves around cookies or cakes or chips or something like that. And so getting them the experience, and really the tool here is mindfulness, right? But getting them the experience of what does that look like? And so we have this tool that we use called intermittent sampling that helps people to learn what it's like to take a couple bites and then almost be like up here looking down on themselves, seeing themselves do that successfully and go, wow, maybe I can actually go to a social event and just have a couple bites of something, or have one single glass of wine, or maybe I can really, it doesn't have to be this so like on or off, black or white way of doing things. I would say, to me, that's the hallmark of moderation, is being able to take a couple bites of something and be good. And that's, for most people, that feels out of the realm possibility.
It does. I was literally just telling the mentorship just before I talked to you today. that, you have to go, you have to experience it. I can sit here and tell you how to ride a bike. I can tell you the exact steps that you can take on how to ride a bike, but until you get on the bike and do it yourself, there's not the connection in your brain. So it does take practice, and it does take, watching yourself do it. And hey, it takes like messing it up too. Like you may eat the whole thing, but that's not a failure. That's just learning. That's just like when you get on a bike, you might fall, but you get up and you figure out how to get back on the bike and not fall again. But also I think what's important about everything you're saying too is like quality of life. It's not about weight loss. It's about quality of life and being able to truly feel in control with food, right? Not like that white knuckling feeling.
It's such a hard sell, like, I'm like also a marketer. So I'm always just like, how can I sell this concept? Because I know it's life changing. Yep. So it's like, how do you sell something that like people need to experience in order to see that as valuable? That's what's really hard about this whole thing. And to your point, that's why I create little like free courses and stuff like that, because I'm like, you know what? It's a 2-week free course. If you absolutely hate it and you gain weight and you just can't stand it, the other way is always going to be there, right? Nothing's irreversible, right? You can always go back to the old way, but give me 2 weeks, right? Give me 10 days, give me a little bit of time to show you that that's possible for you. So what you described, most people are really scared of, right? They're scared of going, well, I'm going to try because like you said, I might mess up, right? I might eat the whole thing. So one of the things we say at moderation is it's not about the outcome, it's about the process. And I don't care if you eat the entire pint of Ben and Jerry's. I care how you eat the entire pint of Ben and Jerry's. Right. So do you practice this mindfulness we call intermittent sampling, where you take some, put it back, take some, put it back. Now, if you're listening to this, maybe that sounds neurotic to you. Like I'm going to take a little bit, put it back, take a little, put it back. But that's literally how we teach people mindfulness is literally have a portion, put it back, go do something else, give yourself 20 minutes and then assess, do I want to have more? And if you do, zero judgment, right? That's a big part of this is don't judge it, but be honest. Yes, I want more. Awesome. Go back and have it. No issues. So if by the end of the night and you practicing that, you end up polishing off the entire pint of ice cream, at least you had the practice with mindfulness. You weren't sitting on the couch mindlessly finishing it till all of a sudden you're scraping the bottom. So over time, there'll be a night where you're practicing this and within 1 or 2 servings, you're like, I'm good. And that will inevitably happen so long as you stay engaged in this process. And it is a mindfulness practice. In my experience, mindfulness is one of those words, I actually hate that word, just like moderation. I'm not a fan because people's eyes gloss over, right? They're like, oh yeah, mindfulness. Yeah, whatever. But like, there really is a way, and we do this in moderation, 365 is like helping people like quantify it. Like, what does that look like? What does that look like in practice? And we have these exercises that we have our clients do to get them to understand what mindfulness is. It's not just like, putting your fork down between bites. That's fine too. But like, what does it feel like inside to eat to the point of satisfaction and not stuffing yourself? Most people only know starving or stuffed. That's it. So what does 80% fullness feel like? What is it? 60% fullness? What does that feel like? And most of us aren't practiced in what that feels like. So I always say that you'll know you're at 80% full if you can eat more. That's the cue, right? If you know you can eat more, that's 80% full. And for most of us, that's really uncomfortable because we're used to just eating until we can't breathe. And so a lot of these kind of practices take time and take patience, but you have to be in the right headspace to just be like, I don't even give a shit. I just want to have a better relationship with food. And I'm so sick of thinking about this all so hard.
Yeah. And I'm thinking as we're talking, do you find in your program and in your experience that one of the biggest things that I found, or that Tony and I have found, is that body image work and self-worth work is so vital to this process? Because if you are gaining weight and you think that gaining weight is the worst thing that you could do for yourself, because you might gain a few pounds as you're letting yourself eat all the ice cream for the first time in your life, especially if you were already like somebody who was doing like total restriction all the time and artificially keeping your weight really low. So one of the things that we've found is super important is that you have to work on your body image, like in tangent. It like at the same time that you're working on your food relationship, you have to be working on your body relationship. Otherwise, if you you might be so distracted by the fact that your body might be changing or that you could be gaining weight that you don't actually allow yourself that mindfulness and those feelings because you're so afraid of what the calories are doing to your body. Have you had that experience?
Yeah, 100%. I'm so glad you brought that up. It's really important because I think one of the like prompts or exercises I give my clients is what actually changes when you gain 5 or 10 pounds. Like what actually changes? Do you get fired from your job? Do you have a different relationship with your kids? Does your spouse not love you anymore? Literally, like nothing different happens at all. So when you think about it like that, it's like, okay, like the tangible, if you're willing to, you have to be willing to, but if you're willing to look at that and go like, okay, yeah, actually like nothing changes, and also figure out, like we talked about earlier, ways to derive a sense of affirmation that have nothing to do with your looks. Now, I think it's okay to like want to be healthy and fit and whatever. I think when we talk about moderation, there's a subset of people that think that just means you just eat whatever to your heart's desire. And and this is such a weird thing to describe, but yeah, you do. But eating to your heart's desire isn't binging. Right. It's like, yes, I eat what I want when I want, and I stop when I want. And literally I never feel deprived, and I never feel like, and so that's a weird sort of like backdoor way of coming to this, right? It can't be about the calories or the macros. What I have found, especially if you have a long history of dieting, you've sort of dieted yourself into a corner. I call this a really like leveraged metabolism. So when someone says to me, Jill, you don't understand, when I look at bread, I gain weight. I'm like, you probably actually do. Yeah. Right. You probably do because you're so dieted into a corner. Yep. So remember when like COVID started, and I'm talking about like, if people get laid off from their job, then they can't pay their rent. And if they can't pay their rent, then the landlord can't pay the mortgage. And if they can't pay the mortgage, then the bank doesn't get the money. So it's this very like leverage system, right? Where like everything depends on everything else. Same exact thing in your metabolism. So if you are doing tons of exercise, tons of cardio, you're cutting your calories constantly, yes, your metabolism will sort of bounce in the opposite direction. However, it doesn't just keep going up. It doesn't like keep going up and keep going up at this like very linear rate. You might gain an initial quick couple pounds. You might even gain 5 or 10 pounds, but it doesn't keep going like up like this. And I think that's what people are the most scared of. They go, oh my God, I can't turn this off, right? It's like a faucet. You can't turn off. It's like, no, your metabolism is extremely intelligent, and will always auto regulate, but you need to give it the opportunity to. When you're constantly slashing calories and exercising so much, you're telling it to respond very quickly to any increased calories or increased, fat grams or whatever it is that you're scared of. But you need to give it time to regulate itself. And I think if you I always call it like mindfulness or the Mac Daddy tool. Mindfulness really is the key. It's going, okay, I can expose myself to any food, anytime, and trust that I'm not going to overeat it because I'm practicing mindfulness. And most people just don't take the time. And honestly, once you're practiced at it, it's completely automatic. So I just wish that people would take the literally couple of weeks that it would take for them to get practiced at mindfulness, because the definition of mindfulness is that it is automated. It's a low level of automated thinking happening all the time. You're constantly checking in with your biofeedback, hunger, cravings, mood, satisfaction, fullness. But so many of us are just dieting makes us stupider. Take us out of our bodies, right? Yeah. So getting back in touch with those signals and that feedback is a huge piece of it. So there's a lot in it, but honestly, like, if you are listening to this, chances are you're already on the path. If you're listening to this podcast, chances are you either are on this journey already or you really want to be. So that's a good thing. I think someone who's like I was 15 years ago, how you were 15 years ago, we wouldn't even listen to this podcast. No.
I wish there would have been one like that.
Yeah, I wouldn't have been available for it though. Like I wouldn't have been. I've been like, honestly, I would think like I honestly thought moderation was like not hardcore enough.
Yeah, I remember getting grandma. When I first heard these concepts, I remember Tony telling me about it and I got angry. Like I got really mad. Like they want me to eat trans fat? Like that's ridiculous. And that I think is probably the biggest misconception. We call it permission-based eating, kind of that concept of moderation. My goal for my clients, and I don't think your goal for your clients is for them to be eating donuts all day long or just pizza or, just sit around and gain 100 pounds. That's not the goal. The goal actually is to get our clients to a place where they can make a decision about food. So they're more able to make healthier choices for themselves. And the outcomes that I see are not people like they may go through like a honeymoon phase with food, right? But eventually they just get so sick of it and they're like, I want to feel good, or this was fun, but I actually have health goals for myself. I want a physical quality of life too. And that's the great thing about it, I think, is that you have that balance of the physical and mental quality of life together, not just I'm willpowering myself to good health, or I'm willpowering myself to keep my weight down or whatever. But yeah,
totally. I mean, it's, we kind of call it like we do exposure therapy. So like you think about it this way, if you're a mom, you listen to this, and your kids, there's always like kid food in the cabinets, right? There's always like, I don't know, gummy snacks or whatever, probably things that you would never look at right now, right? That's just always in there for your kids. But it's just always in there. So it's just always around. So you're never like, oh, there's never this illicitness about the kids' snacks, right? Because it's just always in there. It's the exact same thing. We need to do that for our own trigger foods. We need to do that for the things we don't trust our own self around. So I love, the concept of permission-based eating. It's like, let's go ahead and just like have that food in the house. And this is so scary for people, especially if you're watching like The Biggest Loser or some of these like TV shows. They have the trainer come into someone's kitchen, pull out all the bad stuff out of the cupboards, like this big, huge thing. So we think that like it's literally just reaffirming that we can't trust ourselves around those foods. And so being able to maybe start with something small, maybe not like your top trigger food, but some other food that you're a little bit scared of, because even just being scared of it puts it on this like pedestal where it's like, oh, I can't be. And then you're just giving so much power over to it. So let's have it in the house, but let's have a system for managing it. Let's have a system for exposing ourselves to it, to be able to give ourselves permission to have a portion here, have a portion there. Let's like figure it out. And then to your point, these foods just become commonplace, just like the kids' fruit snacks do. These other foods, they just become commonplace, and you're able to see like, oh yeah, like I've kept jar of peanut butter in my cupboard for like 3 weeks. Same one, right? I've kept this, my boyfriend always jokes because I have all these like half eaten things all over the place, but like I'll get a big bag of like Sour Patch Kids, and that shit will be in here for like 4 weeks. Yeah. It's just like, it's not illicit. And so I think we need to figure out a way to just expose ourselves to take away that sort of, that illicitness or whatever that is, that power that it has over us. And that's really scary for a lot of people because their only experience with those foods is I overindulge, I binge on them.
Yeah. Thinking that it's the food, and that's what everyone blames, right? Out in the industry, they blame the food because
foods are so palatable and like they're addictive. And it's like, sure. Like, yeah, there's research on like sugar, fat, and salt, but also we have really intelligent prefrontal cortexes that have like a very conscious way of doing things. And once you get practice at that mindfulness, it becomes automatic. So it's not like it's like the food's problem. I mean, I think the idea that corporations to stop making palatable food is stupid. Like that to me is like the silliest like thing. You have no control over that. So instead, why don't you take control over yourself by, listening to this podcast, doing your program, right? Exposing yourself to some of these, solutions.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and do you have suggestions for people who think that they are, or who believe that they are eating emotionally when they are turning to those kinds of foods? Do you have help for them?
Yeah. I mean, I think most people probably it's a boredom eating thing, an emotional eating thing. Cause very rarely, especially if like you find yourself eating a lot after dinner, it's hardly ever a hunger issue. It's never like I'm hungry still, like maybe a little bit, but for the most part, it's probably a craving issue. It's either a boredom issue, an emotional issue, or just like, what else is there to do? And so this tool is still mindfulness, right? The tool is still mindfulness to just know yourself and to know and be able to recognize mindfulness is just awareness. That's all it is. It's self-awareness. It's going, okay, I know I'm feeling stressed. And also I just try to, and it doesn't mean like certain foods need to be off limits, but like I certainly go through periods of time where I'm more stressed, and I'm sure you do too. And I'm just like, yep, I'm having wine tonight, or yep, I'm going to have a little bit of another serving of this, whatever. And I try to just be mindful and watch myself, and also not make it mean that just because I'm having a little extra sugar, a little extra alcohol, that it means I'm going down this rabbit hole I'm never going to be able to pull back from. I look at it like it's transient. Maybe I'm in the middle of a launch and I'm doing a lot, and I'm just like mentally, I don't have the capacity to really like resist. So I'm just like, you know what? It is what it is for now. I trust, and I've had the experience multiple times, that it is transient. So long as you are able to stay mindful, have that mindfulness practice, and then show yourself compassion. Like to me, and I think that we tend to think that showing ourselves compassion will make us go off the rails, and it just doesn't. And you need to, again, have that experience for yourself to realize that's true.
It's actually more motivating. Like, I think if I could get across to anybody, and we talk about this in our program, it's actually more motivating for you to be self-compassionate. You become more consistent when you're self-compassionate. People think, oh, I'm letting myself off the hook. But in reality, you might be able to get like a little bit of short-term success from that, or, abiding by whatever it is that you want to be abiding by. But in the long run, it's not going to work. It's going to be a disaster.
Yeah. I mean, they've actually shown in research that guilt is a really good short-term motivator, but it's a terrible long-term motivator. Yeah. So I think so many of us, we cling to guilt, right? We're like, guilt has utility. If I don't feel guilty, that means I'll really go off the rails.
Yeah.
And it's just not the case. Like, it might get you a day or two of like, clean eating, but then again, your physiology takes over. Yeah. And you talk about this a lot, like in terms of like white knuckling it and things like that. You might be able to for a couple of weeks, a couple of months, even I was able to do for 12 weeks before a show. But at some point, there's always going to be this sort of equal and opposite binge in the other direction. And so you need to, if you're listening to this and you're identifying with these scenarios going, oh my God, that's me. The first step is just awareness to go, wow, the things that I keep trying to do, because I think they should work. I should be stronger. I should have better willpower. I think it's okay to, I think the first sort of step is just being okay with the fact that it's not working. Yeah. Like, that to me was a huge insight. I was like, as much as I want it to work, and if it does work, it means I'm really strong and I have a lot of willpower and I'm a good, it just isn't working. And so I could fight that, or I could just go, you know what, it's not working. I need to figure out something else. And there has to be another solution. I can look around people all around in my life who have good relationships with food. There has to be a solution. What does that look like? And so, I know your program does this for people at Moderation 365, obviously. So if you're even having that insight, give it a try. It feels really scary. And I think you'll agree with this. There's like that little trusting leap that you have to take, right? And so I'll give you guys an example. This is, and this is where real change happens, right? This is like small, minute, little tiny things. To your point is like when the rubber meets the road, we can sit here, listen to podcasts. We can read the intuitive eating book. We can, listen to go on free webinars and do all that. But real change happens in small moments throughout the day. So do you trust yourself to bring home some ice cream and keep it here, right? Do you do that? Yes or no? A few weeks ago, I was at the gym, and I do have a history of excessive exercise as well. And I was doing some cardio. I had like 15 minutes. I was doing some stairs, some intervals, and 15 minutes was up, and I was at like 143 calories, right? Which we know that like the gym calorie counters aren't correct, whatever. So I'm at 143 calories. What do you think my brain wanted to do?
I need to get to 150.
I mean, a 150, right? Yeah. Nice round number.
Yep.
I recognized it in real time. And I'm like, nope, getting off, right? Like getting off. I'm not like going to 150 because that's the neurotic sort of dieting brain.
Gosh, you just saw inside my brain, because that's me too.
But that's all of us.
Yeah.
Right. Like if you've had the history of that, it's like, oh, let me get to the a little bit more. And it's that perfection, that OCD, whatever. And so I knew in that moment, okay, Jill, that's obsessive behavior. If you're going to go and do just like, I need to get now, okay, it's not a huge deal. It's one time, whatever. But I knew that is representative of a person I don't want to be anymore. So I forced myself to get off, right?
Yeah.
143, get off. You said 15 minutes. Cool. Get off. And so it's small moments like that. If you can recognize what the old version of you wants to do, and then stop it in real time and do something else. And that's literally how change happens. Small things like that.
I was just thinking as you were talking, like that really, I feel like that's the majority of what I do, and probably what you have done is just to help people develop self-awareness. There are no answers. There are no black and white answers. There's no boxes to check, the way that we were told that there was. But really what I think that is important is just that self-awareness and starting to understand yourself. Why do I do the things that I do? I'm not going to let anybody tell me what I'm doing anymore. I just need to understand myself really well. And I think that that's, what our program tries to do is to help people to understand themselves and why they might be doing the things that they're doing, and recognizing those unhealthy patterns that might just be from anxiety. They might be from, even trauma. A lot of people have past histories of trauma that are leading them to make these decisions that are just not in their best interest. And so it's just about the question of like, what is in my best interest here as a human being?
Totally. And it's the self-awareness piece is huge, because I think as coaches, and also this is how clients sign up with us, right? Client will sign up and go, okay, you're gonna tell me what to do, right?
Yeah.
And then you're like, actually, I don't tell you what to do. And then like, so there's this idea that like, if they give you the money, that like, you're going to just give them the perfect diet and it's going to shape right up. It's like this A plus B equals C. And so I think there's this education that needs to happen around like, hey, yes, you're hiring me, but also I want to give you your power back, right? I'm not going to take more of your power away. I'm going to give you your power back. And what does that look like? Because a lot of people come to us and they just want us to take it. It feels like relief, like, okay, this Deanna's going to take it for me. And then, they're a little bit in for a surprise, but it always is a gift, right? It's a surprise, but it always ends up being a gift. But I think there's a little bit of sort of education that needs to happen around the client coaching sort of relationship. And of course, we still see a lot of diet programs that want their clients to be dependent on them, right? Just follow the plan, plan, and so we're still seeing these diets, and there's still a lot of people signing up for these diets because it feels nice to have someone just tell them what to do. And I always just cringe because I'm like, they're getting more dependent on a coach. They're getting further away from that self-knowledge that they need, that self-awareness. And so that's where, your program comes in, moderation comes in. We need to flip the script and continue to get these messages out there, because so many people still haven't heard it and still don't get it. And they're going to go through, and it's fine. Like, everyone deserves a full experience, but they're going to go through something similar to what you and I went through, and then hopefully come around and go, you know what, that didn't work. I need something else.
Absolutely. Well, I appreciate you so much today. I could talk to you literally for hours about this stuff. I could just go on, and it doesn't help that I haven't seen you in a long time. So it's just been so good to talk to you today. Where can we find you, and what information do you have about Moderation 365 for everybody?
Yeah, sure. Would love to connect with y'all on Instagram at Jill Fit and at Moderation 365. So if you resonated with a lot of the stuff we talked about today, make sure you're following the Moderation 365 account. That is it's a methodology, tools, strategies, things like that. If you're interested in learning more about the certification, we'll be launching this fall. So as long as you are connected somewhere on social, you will get all the details. So yeah, that's it.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate your time today. If you guys enjoyed this, make sure you go and follow Jill on Instagram. She's amazing, and she's a badass, like literally is a badass. And if you enjoyed the podcast today, please consider giving us a 5-star rating and review, and we will talk to you guys next time.
Bye, guys.